Welcome to the Actuaries in the Wild podcast. I started this podcast because I believe that actuaries are more than just your stereotypical number cruncher that sits at a computer all day. Many of us have endeavors that go well beyond the traditional actuarial realm. My goal is to meet those actuaries who have ventured from their desks to explore their passions. It's time to meet the actuaries in the wild. Today's actuary in the wild is Josh Youdovin. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I want to start by finding out a little bit of information about your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, including what made you decide to become an actuary.
I grew up in Westfield, New Jersey, in the New York area, and I went to college at Brown University. And it was at Brown when I first heard about the actuarial
Hmm.
profession. I was studying for my economic finals with my friend Scott Friedman, and he was saying, actuarial profession, what a great job profession to be in. You get a six-figure salary and you
Hmm.
work in a 9 to 5 job. And I was like, ooh, that sounds
Yeah.
interesting. So as I learned more, I learned that there were a long set of exams. So I explored a number of places in finance, investment banking, management consulting, along with about half my other class. And after talking, it was very clear that the actuarial profession was a good fit for me. I just needed to pass exams. I was a little bit late to the game, so most of my interviews were actually with pension benefits consulting. And then once I got my second exams, then I got more traction with insurance companies. So I found a letter in our career office, and it said, Constitution Reinsurance is looking to hire. So I was like, I've never heard of reinsurance before, but
Yeah.
it's pretty self-explanatory. So I applied. I got the job, and uh, and I worked in reinsurance for 16 years. First at Constitution, it was bought by Gerling. Then I spent a couple of years at St. Paul Re before they became Platinum Re. And then I went to Swiss Re, where I met you, Jeremy.
Right.
And I was doing mostly reserving. I moved to product strategy, and then after 8 years at Swiss Re, it was clearly time to find another direction in my career. So I went to Conning in Hartford, and I did insurance research. I worked in workers' comp and medical professional liability. And then that's where my career went for the next few years. I spent 3 years at New York Compensation Insurance Rating Board
Hmm.
doing workers' comp pricing. And then 5 years ago, I moved to Atlanta. I got a job with MCIC Vermont. We are a medical professional liability risk retention group. We have 7 teaching hospitals in our network. And it's a great company to work for, especially since it became remote in 2020, like a lot of other companies.
Right.
I certainly do not miss that Atlanta commute.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've been to Atlanta a few times, and I've never had a good experience with the traffic in Atlanta, so I
Right.
can understand that. Yeah, and as Josh said, we met each other when we were both at Swiss Re. I worked at Swiss Re for a while, and Josh did too. So we met each other there. But really, why you are here today is because of what makes you an actuary in the wild, and it's really your music background, and I don't just mean your music background meaning your Zoom background you have behind you, but your music background. um, you're not a professional musician, but you're very active musically. So tell us how you got started in music.
I think it started with piano lessons as a kid.
Yeah.
I was studying piano, and there were 2 pianos in the room. And the teacher and I did one exercise where the teacher would play a note, and I would play the note back
Hmm.
without seeing what note it was. And I said, okay, yeah, I'm just repeating these notes.
Right.
And, that's what was happening was that I was showing off my gift, my ear for music.
Right.
And I worked on it. I didn't really practice piano as much as I should have. I think, like many other kids, TV and video games tended to occupy the time that I spent practicing. But I branched off into to different types of music. I took on the saxophone. I played in school band. I back in middle school. It was there was a jazz band. There was a Dixieland style band, and in high school. And one thing I found was that the older I got, the bigger my saxophone was.
Yeah.
I started with the alto saxophone, and then the tenor, and then the bari sax, which you need a lot of air to put into that. But what really was fun was choral music. I
Yeah.
started in my uh, in my elementary school choir, and
Yeah.
then
Would you say you said that that's kind of where you're mostly active right now, is in
right,
the choral music? Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that. Yeah.
yes. So that's yeah, and right now it's most of my choral music is in Jewish music, and my first experience with that was in Sunday school.
Hmm.
It's there was my next door neighbor. His name was Steve Dropkin, and he became the choir director in our Sunday school. And he wanted to have a lot of fun. He didn't want to just sing traditional Jewish music. Like one example is on Hanukkah, there's this little top called a
Hmm.
dreidel that we spin. It's four
Right.
sided. If it lands on a certain side, then you either win chips or you lose chips, or you do nothing. And there's this cute little song that goes, I have a little dreidel, I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh dreidel I shall play. So Steve did a special doo-wop version of it, written by Rabbi Dan Freelander and cantor Jeff Klepper, that went, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, wah, wah, ooh, yeah. Oh, I had a little dreidel. I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh dreidel, I shall play. Ooh ah ooh.
So talked to me when we talked earlier. Said you were in Hoboken when you were singing with the synagogue there. It was only a couple years that you were there, and then you took an extended break. What was your experience while you were there in Hoboken during your, I would say, your first stint singing with the synagogue?
Yeah, so Hoboken, this was 25 years ago. This is a small synagogue in Hoboken, which is just across the Hudson River from New York City. And we had a new rabbi who, incidentally, is still there. His name is Rob Scheinberg. And Rob had studied in at Columbia, and he
Hmm.
went to Jewish Theological Seminary. And there was a and he helped start this one a cappella group that sang Jewish music. It was called Pismon, and
Okay.
he wanted to bring some of that experience to Hoboken, and I loved it. It
Yeah.
was a lot of fun just being more involved in the services, and it just it felt great to be part of a choir. I'd say the one drawback is that, like many amateur choirs, there aren't very many men who sing,
Yeah.
and so
Okay.
so that means that where whatever was needed to be sung, I uh, I had to do that, which meant that I had to sing bass. And while I love bass, I think the bass really puts a gives the music a life to it that you know it gives it a certain depth. So I absolutely love that. The problem with bass though is that, like, if a note is a little bit too high for you, you can sing a falsetto. Frankie
Right.
Valli made a lot of money with the falsetto. You can't really falsetto a bass. All you can really do very early in the morning before your voice is actually developed. And yes, maybe you can. There are also certain techniques I learned later in life in terms of just opening up the mouth a little bit more. But yeah, I'd say that was the one challenge, but totally worth it because I really enjoyed the music. I'd say one song that really stood out was this song. It went Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami Nachamu Nachamu Yomar Elokechem. And these were the words that were written by Isaiah shortly after the temple was destroyed in Jerusalem. And for an
Okay.
English translation of it, you should go no further than the beginning of Handel's Messiah.
Okay.
Comfort ye, comfort ye, my people. So yes, for those of you who will watch a Messiah performance during the holiday season, listen for that, and you will now know the background.
Well, thanks. That's interesting. I know, talking about bass and tenor. When I was in choir in high school, we only had two guys in our first year I was in choir, and I had to sing some bass, and I'm not a bass, I'm a tenor. And luckily, the second year I was in high school, we added a few more, and then we had about 10, so we had able to have other few others sing, but it definitely was experience trying to sing bass when you're a tenor. So it's a little more difficult to do that. Um, so you mentioned it was 25 years ago that you had this first stint, but you didn't pick up. I would say singing more. I would say not full time, but more continuously back until 2012 again. What made you decide to start back up in 2012?
So at that point, when I moved to Hartford, I joined a synagogue, Bethel Temple
Hmm.
in West Hartford, and it had a really good cantor, Joseph Ness, and he directed a choir. And it it took a few months before I finally heard their first performance. And once I did, I saw how much I had missed and how much
Yeah.
I wanted to be back into that. So I went up to one of the three tenors of the choir. That's another quirk about choirs with men. Tenors tend to be a little bit harder to find because the average age of a person in an amateur choir tends to be on the old side, and as people get older, the voices get deeper. Anyone who's watched an opera knows that the heroic young hero who marries the beautiful princess is a tenor, while his father tends to be a bass.
So you moved back to Hoboken in 2014. How was this experience different than what you had before there, and what was most challenging about it?
So it was really the experience was just the nostalgia of hear my first adult choir. They actually we sung Nachamu once again, and I did not miss a beat. I
Yeah,
remembered how that was. A lot of the people were the same. There were some new people, and I saw why I enjoyed being part of that synagogue. It's such a great group, and it had expanded quite a bit since I had last been in there, but not the choir. The
I
choir
see.
was still small, and actually having sung tenor, I asked if I could continue to sing tenor, and Rabbi Rob said, even if Pavarotti walked into this room, we would sing bass. So I had to make that adjustment again to the lower notes, but
Yeah.
it was very exciting. One you know some pieces I remember they were sung by a uh, a 17th century Italian composer named Salomone Rossi, and he sang in the Renaissance early Baroque style. And for that was a lot of fun because there would be periods of time when you did not hear the bass, and then the bass would make the grand entrance.
I
And
see.
I felt like that this was heroic, that I was making the music more sophisticated and adding more blend to it. So despite the fact that sometimes I was croaking out those really low notes, I felt that this was a fun part and especially a needed part. I like to help out wherever we need, and we needed some bass voice, and oftentimes I was the only one there, so it was a great feeling.
That sounds good. And then you mentioned earlier when we were talking about your actuarial career that you moved to Atlanta. I know it was after a job change. You know, you mentioned your wife had moved there too, and so, but you found a new synagogue, new choir. And you, when we talked earlier, you said this was a different experience. What made this different from your other experiences back in Hartford and Hoboken?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, we didn't call it a choir. We called it a
Okay.
chorus, and
Yeah.
it's a very subtle difference. I didn't even realize what it was until I Googled it last
Yeah.
night. That yeah, the choir, it's mainly focused on the singers.
Hmm.
They maybe they'll have an organ or a piano or a guitar accompanying them, but it's mostly just the singers. Where with our chorus, most of the times that we sing, we have musicians in the background. It's they usually will have percussion, we'll have guitar or a bass. Sometimes we'll have a string ensemble.
Okay.
So that's what, and that was one thing I had to reconcile because I tend to be more of a traditionalist, and traditionally, your synagogues often are not supposed to be playing instruments on the
Right.
Sabbath,
Yeah.
and so it's just at first I thought I was breaking the rules, but then I realized why that rule was in place, and
Hmm.
this actually came at the time when there was a fear that if somebody was playing guitar and they broke a and they would have to fix the string, and that would be
Yeah.
considered doing work on the Sabbath. And I thought, yeah, I think instruments are okay.
Right.
So that's one thing, one difference I noticed. It's and the director is a really fabulous guy. His name is Will Robertson. And yes, yeah, the actuaries do tend to like sci-fi,
Yeah.
so I would figure that whoever is viewing this right now, there's at least a 42% chance that they just yell danger in the last minute. So Will is he's a writer, he's a arranger, he plays many instruments very well. Plays the guitar, piano, double bass, electric bass, accordion. He'll play some percussion, and he's also a music producer, and he's been
Okay.
very successful at that too. In fact, very recently, one of the albums he produced, Ruthie Foster Live at the Paramount, got a Grammy nomination. So just the
Wow.
advantage
Yeah.
is that not only can he do the sound, but he can also produce albums that
Right.
we've had over the years. I'd say one of his arrangements that really stands out is a piece that starts out as a tune to Bach's St. Matthew's Passion. So it goes like this. Ooh, 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 ooh. There are many times I felt forsaken, and many times confused. Yes, I've often felt forsaken and feeling used. But it's alright, just weary to the bone. Still, it's hard to be bright and bon vivant when you're far away from home, so far away from home. So that piece that went after the Massive Passion was a tune that Paul Simon wrote based on St. Matthew's Passion
Okay.
called An American Tune.
Okay.
And
I see.
So several years before I joined the chorus, Paul Simon came to the Emory campus to give a lecture, and the chorus opened up for him.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yes,
that's pretty neat.
I heard he said it was good.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Um, so I know you've been in Atlanta for 5 years, and you were still singing in the chorus during the pandemic. And I know, like many places, the synagogue closed down a time where you were not meeting in person, but you still tried to have opportunities where you were trying to meet virtually. So how did the pandemic both present challenges in doing this, but also opportunities for you?
Well, the challenge, of course, is that we very much miss singing together.
Right.
This was a challenge with a number of choruses. We were meeting on Zoom, and on Zoom we couldn't sing at the same time, so we mainly just had to listen and do some practice. But we were in a very interesting situation that we were in the process of recording an album
I
called
see.
Red Thread,
Hmm.
and that's based on a story from chapter 2 in the book of Joshua.
Okay.
And so we had recorded some of the songs in the synagogue, and now what now? And so we figured, okay, this
Okay.
will just pass. In a couple of weeks, we'll be back together. And then when it was clear it wasn't passing, we
Hmm.
had to figure out a way to do that. So we all had to be individual music producers and sound engineers, and to do the recordings ourselves. And we had to do many takes, and many of us felt the awkwardness of having to listen to our own voice,
I see.
especially on recording. And even the best singers in our group felt very awkward and very self-conscious about how they sounded. But we got through it, and we ended up producing very beautiful music with a lot of excellent guidance from Will, who just did such a great job pivoting. And then and I ended up doing a lot of virtual choirs as well,
I see.
through other organizations. Sometimes it was just a one-off. Somebody was looking to create a music video and get our faces together. And there's actually this one synagogue in the Boston area where I virtually joined their choir,
Right.
and this was a fun experience, being able to sing from a distance, put together music videos. And to me, the sound was really the easy part, because you just, yes, it's the same
Hmm.
concept. You just practice singing until you get it right. The hard part for me was the lighting.
Yeah.
Yes, in fact, our chorus in Atlanta, we created this video called "On the Day We Are Together Again," which was a very pandemic themed, beautiful song by
Right.
the singer known as Humbird. And people just put in this beautiful video, and with the music. And one of our chorus members, Howard, did such a masterful job putting it together. And there I am. The light was just looking shining in my face. My hair was just, it had the COVID hair that had not been cut in
Yeah.
a long time and was not brushed very neatly. And it's just like, I love that video, but I cringe anytime I appear
Yeah.
on the screen. But eventually, I got it right. My father was kind enough to a ring light, which is what I'm using right now. So
Yeah.
so that you're of course, there's only so much you could do with glasses. You're always going to get some
Yeah.
sort of reflection in there. And you know and I also had to make some trade-offs, like like I've found out that recording on the phone is actually better for sound, but not as good for pictures. So
Right.
I traded off, and I used my computer. So the sound quality was not quite as good, but it wasn't terrible. So, and it made me look better. And I figure the sound engineers can definitely work on the sound, but they can't make me look better. So that's that's what I could control. And then over time, we actually, our chorus in Atlanta found this application called Jamulus, where people could actually sing together online in real time.
Okay,
And it was
that's
just, it
neat.
was such a great feeling to be able to do that. Some people were in tears. The problem was that the yeah, the tech maintenance on that is very demanding,
I
and we
see.
ran into to a lot of snafus along the way, and a lot of frustrations. And by the time we figured it out, the vaccine came out, and we were all together again. So
Yeah.
but we did get a few uses out of it, and even did the high holiday services on Jamulus that
Oh, cool.
fall, and that was great, but not as great as the feeling of actually singing together for the high holidays just a few weeks ago,
Right.
and that just felt really special for all of us.
Yeah, I know. Like me, I'll say that having some of these, you you talk about recording all these things virtually and all the so now they're out there available, and I've seen that from other areas that have recorded songs too, and it's always good to have more resources out there too. So I think that that has actually been uh, there's good things that have come out of the pandemic. I think more people have done more of these things and saved more of these recordings and music opportunities. I think there's more things out there now musically than what you had before the pandemic because more people have collaborated and done these things. So I think it's really neat to see more content out there than what you had before. I think that's really has been a positive. I know that I don't want to say that it's a blessing that this happened, but I think there's some good things that have come out of it. Um, so I want to switch off. We've talked about your choirs and your chorus and things like that, um, but you did have an opportunity to play in an actuarial band. Now I know that probably some people watching this, actuaries watching this, are probably thinking, "What's an actuarial band?" uh, but tell us a little bit about this actuarial band and what instruments you played in it.
So yeah, so it's a known fact that math people are musical.
Hmm.
There is a lot of math that goes into music, whether you're counting beats or you're just trying to time things. So and the community knew that, and so we had 100th anniversary of the founding of the Casualty Actuarial Society, and there was a big meeting in New York. It had over 1,000 participants,
Hmm.
and so the society wanted to do something really special for it, and they wanted to put together a chorus, and they actually called it an orchestra because there were stringed instruments in there as well. So of course, I wanted to do both, but
Right,
they said I had to choose one or the other, and it at that point I hadn't picked up a saxophone in, I'd say, about more than 20 years, and
right.
I thought, let me just pick it up again and see that it was a friend of mine, Dave Hoffman, who had bought a saxophone, and then it was sitting in his storage locker, and he graciously gave it to me, and so I practiced again, and I knew the notes, but it was very difficult to get that same
Yeah.
sound that I could get on. There were a lot of squeaks going on that I never fully resolved
Hmm.
during the performance, but it felt to get back again. I was living in an apartment back then, and whenever I would practice, I could hear my next door neighbor cranking up the TV volume on his side, but he was okay with that as long as it wasn't after midnight.
Yeah.
And it was a really, I love the repertoire of music. Rhapsody in Blue. There was a John Williams medley that started out with the Star Wars theme.
Hmm.
There was a Beatles medley. There was Glenn Miller's "In the Mood," and we only had 3 rehearsals together.
Oh, I see.
So this was a real tour de force. Of course, we practiced on YouTube in our spare time. But to put it all together, it was a real labor of love. You know, Ron Latovsky was the conductor who arranged it, and he did a really fabulous job putting it all together. We played about half the speed of what the music should be, but and when we performed it, certainly it was a little bit difficult to get a room full of people who were all together with their colleagues to stop talking. But if you want to watch us, you'll look up CAS Centennial Orchestra on YouTube, and especially listen to the Power Pop medley.
Okay.
That has one of them has an actuarial song parody in there that is very cute and very well performed, especially by the singers of the chorus.
So you mentioned actuarial song parodies. Have you written any actuarial song parodies that you'd like to perform?
Why, as a matter of fact, I have.
Okay.
Okay, let me cue up the music. And just to give you a little bit of a background on this, early in my career, there was an actuary in my department whose name was Kenneth. And to this day, I regret not asking him this question. And in the spirit of the state of Georgia, I give you a song parody from one of our home home from one of our favorite bands, REM. What's the frequency, Kenneth? Has your PNC run off? Pricing workers' comp, auto, and property. I thought I'd completed Schedule P. Adverse losses made a fool out of me. I never understood the frequency. Loss ratio expectations did not compute. I'd studied for exams and I read Actuarial Review. And when I speak to other people, I look at their shoes. Took loss over exposures to get premiums. But your methodology used GLMs. Social inflation, distorted severity. I didn't understand. I never understood the frequency.
I'm sure actuaries will get that, especially the part looking at other people's shoes.
Yes,
On that.
maybe we should include a glossary of insurance terms in the chat.
Well, thanks, Josh. I appreciate you being my guest on Actuaries in the Wild. If you're an actuary or know an actuary who's ventured out into the wild, contact me so that we can share your story. You can find Actuaries in the Wild on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time on Actuaries in the Wild.